Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tom Rivera, and welcome to our oral history project. We are on the fourth floor of the Fowle Library at Cal State San Bernardino, and it's approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. And with us, our guest this afternoon is Mr. Gilbert Garcia. Gilbert, welcome to our interview this afternoon, and your wife, Mary Van Aken Garcia. Mary, welcome.
Thank
You
you.
and I have known each other for
many
many
years.
years. So it's a delight to
Yeah.
have you here this afternoon. Why don't we start with the interview? You know, we have our cameraman, which is Mr. Frank Acosta, and Frank had your children when he was teaching at Colton Middle School.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have my wife Lily over in the corner, and we have
Doreen Perez.
Doreen Perez, that's also with us. Welcome, Doreen. Why don't we get started with our interview this afternoon? It's going to be very informal,
Okay.
but I do want to learn about growing up in South Colton. During the time that you were in South Colton, you know, as little
Yeah.
kids and growing up and going to elementary school, middle school, and also high school. The first question is, how did you folks meet? How did you two meet?
At a wedding.
Moy Flores' wedding.
Tell me about that wedding. Moise Flores was a Colton person also. Who did he marry?
Rosa Flores from the Flores family on 8th Street,
That's true, yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
you know, right by the Wilson
And
School.
what year was that?
I'm 53.
1953?
No, 54.
And 54?
No,
53.
53.
Yeah.
1953, and was it love at first sight, Gil?
No.
Or, I mean, how did that happen?
No, the first madrina one was my partner. I was a padrino on the
Okay,
wedding.
you were an usher.
Yeah, and she
Okay.
was a madrina. And she was a real good friend of
She was my best friend.
Oh, so that's
Yeah.
what happened. So
So,
it was a
at
a
the wedding.
conspiracy.
Yeah.
Mary conspired that, eh?
So at the wedding, that's where
No,
we met.
he
the
said,
wedding.
you girls want to go for a ride in my car?
What kind of car was it, Mary?
52
Two.
Chevy.
It was almost a brand new
Yeah.
Chevy.
And
Well-
then he said, we said, no, we want to go in this other one, which was a 53 Chevy that was his brother's. And he said, but he doesn't have a radio, and I do. So we all said, well, we'll go in the car with a radio. And then you took two of your buddies, Sal Flores
Mhm.
and somebody else. And then we all piled in the back, and we went Lake Arrowhead.
Lake Arrowhead.
We went for a ride up to Lake Arrowhead, took pictures, you know, and got back in the car and went back down to the wedding.
Now, Mary, how did that happen? Your mom and dad were very strict.
Well, I was at the wedding, and they knew I was with Connie,
Uh-huh.
and they didn't know I went. I didn't tell. And then that night, we went to the dance, you know,
Uh-huh.
and he danced with me.
So that was the beginning then?
Yeah,
That was the beginning.
yeah.
And how long did you date?
For off and on about a year.
A year?
Yeah,
And then you got married in 53?
54.
54.
Yeah,
In 54. And you were a young bride. How
Yeah.
old were you?
16 and
You
a
were
half.
16 and a half. And Gil, te la robaste.
Yeah. At the time, I don't know who, I thought she was about 18 or older.
Ah, okay.
In fact, when I learned that how old she was, I almost stopped dating her because
My stupid brother's girlfriend said, oh, you're not old enough to get your driver's license yet. And that's when he knew then I wasn't 16. He said, I almost left.
yeah, I
No,
almost stopped dating her because she was a lot younger.
He was too young. Eh?
Yeah.
You know, at the start of this presentation, Frank took some pictures of your wedding, and we have them here on the wall. So we'll try and scan them and put them as part of this presentation.
Okay.
Now, your wedding, tell me about your wedding. Was it a big wedding or?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a mass at Immaculate, and at that time they were already had built a new church. And then we had, because we got at 9 o'clock mass. Back then you had to get married early. You couldn't wait till the afternoon. And then we had the reception back at my dad's.
Uh-huh.
And he had black fella that barbecued for him.
Uh-huh.
And you know those big things where they mix cement? What were they
Mix
called? No, that was like on the ground or on a table
Oh.
or, the guys used to mix the cement.
Tina?
No, like
Like a
a,
trough.
Oh, okay.
and so they rigged it up and put a thing on it so he could barbecue. And then Gil had got about a 200-pound calf
Yeah.
and had it all made into steaks so that he could barbecue the steaks. And then my mom and his sisters, they made salad and beans and rice and, you know, all the
So it
trimmings.
was a big,
Big
wonderful,
wedding,
beautiful
yeah,
wedding
yeah.
then. Yeah. Were your brothers in the wedding?
Yeah, yeah, there's a picture there of
Uh-huh.
the two of them.
It was Freddie and
George.
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 They were both in the wedding.
We call
Yeah.
him, he was George Robert, and we call him Bobby.
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 Here's a picture of our,
We called him Bobby until he started dating a girl that had a brother named Bobby,
Uh-huh.
and that was his name, Bobby. He didn't have a name, so then we started calling him
Oh,
George.
this is a nice picture.
And then that's my brother Fred.
This is a nice picture. You were a tall guy, Gil.
well, 5'8".
Yeah, you were a tall guy.
My dad was over 6 feet.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm gonna borrow this picture and
Yeah.
we're gonna scan it and leave it as part of our project. Now, where did you go to school?
Started out at St. Bernardine's and went there to the 5th grade, and then on February of the 5th grade, I forgot the year, my mom moved us to Garfield. And then we went to Garfield just from February to June, and then to Wilson Junior High, and then to high school.
So you went to school in the barrio,
Mhm.
Garfield Elementary,
Yeah.
and also
Wilson.
Wilson Junior High School.
Yeah.
How about you, Gil?
Well, when I moved to Colton, I was in the 6th grade. I went to Wilson Junior High at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you said you moved to Colton.
Yeah.
Where did you live before?
Well, I was born and lived in Jerome, Arizona till I was 9 years old.
Okay.
My father worked at the mine, and they closed that mine. So then he moved to a place called Gold Road, Arizona, which was about Oldman, Arizona. Know where it is?
Yes.
Okay, we moved there. It was a gold mine, and my father worked there, so we moved to Gold Road, and I lived there till 42. 42, the government during the beginning of the war, they wanted the mine closed because it was gold, so they wanted all those miners to go work in mines that were more essential, like lead and iron and copper and
To help with the war.
whatever. So they closed the mine. So that's what my father, he didn't want us to grow up in a mining town, because it's, you grow up in a mining town and you kind of progress and
You
work
become a
in
miner. Yeah.
So that's when he moved to Colton.
Okay.
And he moved to Colton. He had some friend here, and he told them they were hiring at what then the beginning of Kaiser Steel. So he moved to Colton to work at Kaiser Steel.
Oh, so that's when Kaiser Steel was just developing that.
Yeah, in 42.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
What year
building.
was that, Gil?
1942,
1942. And when you moved to Colton, where did you live?
South Colton.
What part of South Colton?
Guy Cinco, by Georgia Street, just south of Georgia Street. There used to be a little store, Bocanegra, a little grocery store, and right adjacent to Bocanegra was a beer and wine store, Jimmy
Or
Reese.
Jimmy Reese's
Yeah.
beer and wine
Oh, yeah.
store.
And we lived right across the street from the.
So you lived in el barrio de la calle Cinco.
Guy Cinco.
La calle Cinco. And then when you were there, you said you went to Wilson Junior High School?
Junior high school.
As a 7th grader or a 6th grader?
Sixth grade, seventh,
Sixth
sixth
grade.
grade, seventh and eighth, and then, of course, went to high school.
And you went to high school what year? Do you remember, Gil?
I started in 45, I think, guess it was, 46, something like that.
45, and you graduated from Colton High School?
Yes.
Yeah. What year?
1949.
1949? And Mary, you went to Wilson Junior High School? And then you started Colton High School?
yeah.
And then you fell in love with Gil and quit school
Yeah.
and married him?
Yeah, and I was supposed to finish school, but he was going to UCR, and he would drop me off at high school,
Mhm.
and then he would pick me up, and then we had to rush home to fix him something to eat and pack a lunch, because then he had to go to Ontario to the base to work. And it was like scramble, and so finally I said, I'm quitting school. I said, I'll get a GED after, so that's what I did.
You did got your, you
Yeah,
did get your
yeah,
GED,
Yeah,
but family was first, and Gil was top of the list.
yeah.
Okay. Now, your mom and dad, Fred and Sarah, they were quite a couple.
Yeah,
Your dad was Irish?
Dutch Irish.
Dutch Irish.
Van
Very,
Aken's a Dutch name,
yeah, Van Aken is a Dutch name.
yeah.
Your dad was very Dutch Irish.
Yeah.
Very Dutch Irish. But your mom was not. Your mom was she Mexican or was she Native
No,
American?
well, she was Native American.
Native
But
American?
her father was from Mexico and my grandmother was from LA,
Uh-huh.
and she was born in LA.
And how did they meet?
I don't know. We never ever found out how they met. I know he came from Detroit and went to LA to work, and they met somewhere in LA.
Uh-huh. Now, why did they come to Colton?
When my dad started working at Norton,
Uh-huh.
and for a while we stayed with my grandfather in LA, but then the commute to Norton, you know, and then he was living with some guys, and then finally he says, no, we're moving to Colton because I want my family here.
Uh-huh.
So we moved to Colton.
Now, where in Colton did you move?
On Pine Street, like right across from the park. I don't remember the address. And
But it was on Pine Street
Yeah.
before they built the housing project.
yeah, and that, well, the houses were still there. They're still there. And then he bought a lot down South Pine
Uh-huh.
and built a house, and then that's where we moved and lived.
So you lived on Pine Street, and that was La Paloma.
Yeah.
Okay, that
And,
was
the- and
La
then
Barrio La
Congress
Paloma.
too was La Paloma, wasn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
it was.
Because then in 1950, we moved to Congress,
Okay.
and we lived there. Now it's a parking lot.
No, but your neighbors on Pine Street, you said there was an empty lot on the corner of
Mhm.
Pine and Congress, and then who followed? The
The
Gonzalez?
Gonzaleses,
And then after that?
then us, and then the Dominguezes.
Okay, okay.
And then we had another empty lot, and then Kirk Street, I think, was a little
Right,
street that
right.
went there.
Yeah, and this was before the city took over the properties and built the
Yeah,
housing project.
built the project.
Now, across from you lived Mrs. Blakely,
Uh-huh.
black family. I think it was the only black family in
Yeah.
Colton. Tell us, what do you remember about the Blakely family?
She was a very mean lady,
Uh,
very mean. And she had a brother, an older brother, and I can't remember what his name was. I want to think like Wilfred or something like that. But she had like a compound, you know, daughters and sons living all little houses around her.
So her property was just a family kind of
Yeah,
property
yeah.
with lots of families living in different houses in the
Yeah.
property. Okay, because I do remember John Blakely, and then my mom tells me that she went to school with Juanita Blakely.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember
She
Juanita?
lived there, yeah. She lived there. She just died a few years ago. I
Uh-huh.
remember reading it in the paper.
Mhm.
And, because, you know, it had her maiden name and then her married name. And so I said, oh, I remember her. Because she was a very attractive black woman.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then next door to her on Congress were the Chavezes.
Oh, Art Chavez.
Uh-huh,
Art Chavez
Art
and Jenny.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
And then next to them was an empty lot, and then was the Matos.
Yes.
I
Okay.
can't remember their, I know that one of the daughters was Mary. She was an older daughter, but I don't remember the rest of the family. And then on the other side of the street was an empty lot, and then the Montañeses lived there. And then the Mercados lived next door to them. And we used to call them, the whole neighborhood called them the Hatfields and the McCoys, because they were always fighting, always, over
The
anything.
Mercados and who?
And the Mercados and the
Montañez.
Montañeses.
Montañeses.
Yeah,
They lived on Flores, or did they live on Congress?
no, Flores Street.
On Flores
Yeah,
Street, they lived
yeah,
on Flores Street.
Yeah, that street's still there,
Uh-huh.
but they've built new houses all over there, you know,
Uh-huh.
even on Congress. And it's like, gosh,
Different now.
yeah,
It's a lot different.
very different.
Yeah. Now, Mary, what I remember about your dad and your mom is that your dad was very supportive of us as kids. You know, we used to play softball on baseball field at Veterans
Mhm.
Park, the square, um, behind your new house. And we had a little softball team. We had Danny Gonzalez, we had Ed Dominguez, we had your brother Freddie, and then we had Chudo, and we had Tommy Tamure, and we had, you know, all the guys in the barrio.
Yeah.
Lucio, I can't remember.
Perez.
Perez was also part of that team. But after the baseball season was over in the summer, your dad would pile us up in his truck and take us to the beach.
Yep,
He would take us to Newport. And I remember your dad doing that every summer,
yeah.
every
We used to
summer,
go to the beach all the time.
every summer. And then your mom was very active in the school. Tell us about your mom.
Well,
Está chiquitita,
my-
¿verdad?
My
Está
mom and
chiquitita.
dad, for years, my dad, you know, being that he always had plants,
Uh-huh.
he would, I don't remember what plant it was, but he would save the cans from canned goods, and then he would plant all these little plants. I mean, he had hundreds of them, and then we'd sell them at the school. So remember, they used to rent a bus to take the kids places? And I think my brother was in Mr. Hosea's class.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And he was always very
grade,
active in
fifth
that,
grade.
yeah, about taking trips here and there, and so that's how they would raise money.
Uh-huh.
And then my mom and dad also did the same thing for the Mercuries, so they
Well,
could
tell
go
us
to
about the
Mexico
Mercury.
City. We
had
used to
a-
go across the street to the games every time they had a game.
just about every
Yeah,
Sunday.
We were there to the
Yeah.
games.
The
Yeah.
Mercuries, that was the baseball team
Yeah.
that Colton had.
Yeah.
Very good baseball.
I played
team.
with them for
You're kidding.
quite a few years, yes. They had
What-
a
What
base-
position did you play?
Second base.
Second base?
They had a team of baseball that played on Sundays. And they also have a softball team that played, at that time softball was very active at night
Uh-huh.
recreation. So I also played with them in the softball team.
What years did you play with the Mercuries, Gil?
God. Well, I started playing when I was still in high school.
Okay,
I wasn't supposed to, but quite a few of us kids,
the late forties then,
yeah,
the late forties.
we started playing with the Mercuries. And we weren't supposed to because they was considered semi-pro and the high school had rules.
Oh, okay.
But we played anyway.
Uh-huh. And you played for several years? You played
What?
second base?
Second base, quite a
Yeah.
few years.
Do you remember any of the players that you played with?
Yeah, let's see, Mike Mercado was one
Yes.
of them. Mike and
He was also from that area?
Yeah.
And
And,
Jim
uh,
Barthel played.
Jim Barthel, he was from the side, he was a friend of mine, and the Cuates, the Real brothers, Ernie.
Yeah, Real Brothers,
Yeah.
Ernie and
Manuel,
Manuel?
yeah. And the only way I could tell them apart, because Manuel bat right-handed and Ernie batted left-handed. Because they are almost identical twins.
Yeah.
And, so I played with them for a while. But I played with the Mercuries for years until I had, because I got married, I had to quit to start working, and that's when I had to quit
Yeah.
playing.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's I would have played forever, I guess.
And during the week, you played softball with them?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what cities did you play against? What other teams did you play against?
Redlands had a team. San Bernardino had two teams. They call them Merchants and the American Legion Post 709. Played against them. And there was a team that used to come from Riverside and Corona that played against us.
Uh-huh.
We played against them, yeah. At that time, that was kind of before TV, and softball games in the afternoons at night was very popular. And we played a lot of softball.
Especially on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And do you remember who the Vince Scully of that time was, that made the announcements for the team? Was it Pete Lukey?
That name's familiar, but I don't know if he was.
Or was it Gonzalez, what's the last name, first name? I can't remember. But I thought Pete Lukey used to do some of
Yeah. And-
the announcing.
I can't.
Manuel Gonzalez, Manuel, or,
Yeah.
but Pete Lukey was,
Pete Lukey was one of the announcers,
Yeah.
yes. And so you played also all year then?
yeah.
You played all year. Yeah. But you mentioned your dad. How did your dad help the Mercuries?
He would sell plants again to raise money when they were gonna go to Mexico City. They needed money, you know, and to help go. for all the players to go, and so my dad was always selling plants, and my mom would fix stuff and sell it, and just always selling stuff.
So it was a tournament in Mexico City or Mexico? or-
Mexico City, they had a big tournament down there
Do you remember what year that was?
in the forties sometime,
Okay.
yeah.
But your dad was very active in raising money for the
Yeah.
Mercury.
Not only that, he was also very supportive of Boy Scouts, her father.
The who?
Her father
Boy
was very
Scouts.
supportive of Boy
Troop
Scouts.
45.
Yep,
Yeah,
Troop 45.
yeah,
I was a Troop 45 person myself.
yeah.
Yeah. And how did he support the Boy Scouts?
He would raise, he'd have barbecues, and he raised money to donate to the Boy Scouts. And
Uh-huh.
he used to transport him, and he had a station wagon he had a pickup too for a while, didn't he?
mhm,
And he'd load him up and take him to the beach or just to different places to we were playing, so he was very supportive of the Boy Scouts.
So very community youth supportive. And your mom was in the PTA.
yeah, oh
Tell us
yeah.
about her activities with school.
Just helping out with whatever, whoever needed her to help out,
Uh-huh.
she was always there.
Did she get any awards?
No, not that I can remember, not at the junior high at all, not till,
Frank, did she get any awards?
Tell
Mrs.
what-
Van
From the
Aken?
PTA, the honorary service award, and then later the continuing service award.
yeah, but not at Wilson, I don't think they gave things at Wilson, I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Mary, other things that you guys did, you know, in growing up before you got married, other things that you did, how did you keep busy? You know, Gil, you were, from the first part of of our discussion this afternoon, you flew planes.
Yeah.
You flew jet planes.
Mm.
Now, how did you get involved in flying? Because at that time, it was very difficult for Mexicans to really get involved and be pilots. How did you get involved?
I was working at Ontario Airport. I was working a night job, a swing shift job, and my choice, so I could go to school during the day. And I was working there in the airport with the pilots and met them, and so I was real active with the pilots, and I got the bug from them, and that's when someone started to went to flight school.
So, what year was this, Gil? Do you remember? Was this after high school?
Yes.
Okay.
I graduated from flight school in '58, so it
Okay.
was 2 years before that,
48?
in '48.
48, okay.
We lived in Georgia for 8 months while he was going to preschool.
Pre-flight.
But the first one you went to in Lackland.
Lackland. I was just kind of introductory, preparing to go
And then the
to,
boys and I joined him in Georgia.
we went to primary, they call
Yeah,
it primary.
And then from there, we went to
Big Spring.
Texas, Big Spring, for his,
So your training was very extensive then?
What's that?
Your training was very,
But
Thorough.
even though it was for the guard, but it was the same as an Air Force pilot, and I went
Uh-huh.
through the whole training. The only guarantee I had of being with the guard, that when I graduated, I came back to the guard. Of course, the Air Force, you went to the Air Force wherever they
Uh-huh.
sent you. And I was always envious. A lot of the pilots that were students with me at school, at flight school, they were envious because they didn't know they could go to fighters or multi-engine training afterwards. I was guaranteed a fighter pilot because that's what my squadron had.
okay.
So they were very envious of me because I knew where I was going and they didn't.
Since you were a fighter pilot, before we get into that, Mary, you mentioned different locations where he went to train. Tell me, the first location was where, Gil?
Well, I went to Lackland for introductory.
Where's
This is some,
Lackland? Where's Lackland?
San Antonio, Texas.
Okay,
And then from there, I went to Spence Air Base in Georgia
okay,
to primary.
Moultrie, Georgia.
okay. And then?
And then after I graduated from primary at Spence, and I went to Big Spring, Texas, Webb Air Force Base, and went to my jet training there. And then I came home and got training for fighters here and at Ontario. Flying out of
So you
Ontario.
were a jet fighter pilot?
Yes.
Wow.
I flew 3 models of the F-86, was real popular from Korea.
Mhm.
I flew the 86A and the D and the L. There's Then after that, I flew the F-102, a Delta. It was a really nice airplane. And then I finished my career flying an O2 observation plane. And my job as an O2 was spotting targets, for the fast-moving targets.
Uh-huh.
We carried smoke rockets on our wings in the O2, and we'd fire the rockets at the potential target, so the fighters could go in, fast movers, we call them. They go in and we'd guide them from from the smoke of a rockets. You know, the target is, 6 o'clock, 1 click or 2 clicks from the target where my rocket is, stuff like that. So that was my job.
And for how long were you a pilot?
28 years. When I began to when I finally retired,
Uh-huh,
20 years.
uh-huh.
Prior to that, I was an enlisted man as supply and then maintenance for 8 years. So I was an enlisted man for 8 years, then I went to flight school and became a fighter pilot, and I flew for 28 years. Total 36 years of service for the Guard and the Air Force.
And
Wow, I'm impressed.
retired as lieutenant colonel.
Oh, you retired as a lieutenant colonel? And when did you retire, Gil?
In 83.
In '83?
It was ROPA, Reserve Officers Promotion Act. You had to, if you didn't have a slot to move up to colonel, you had to retire after 28 years. That's the max. So that's when they retired me, because being in the Guard, in the Air Force, they had to transfer you someplace where there are openings for full colonels.
Uh-huh.
The Guard was static, and we only had one full colonel. There was the group commander,
Uh-huh.
and he had just ahead of me. He had just got promoted. So I tried to get him to retire so I could move up there, but he didn't.
Now, Gil, were you the, that I know of, were you the only Mexican pilot that came out of Colton?
As far as I know, yeah.
I think so too. I think so too.
As far as I know, yeah.
Mary, when you were growing up, you had 2 brothers,
Mhm.
your mom and dad very active, and then your dad and mom supported a little softball team that we had, the neighborhood kids,
Mhm.
and you were the B-A-T, B-A-T girl,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You were other activities, Mary, that you did for entertainment while you were growing up. Can you remember other things?
No, just the neighborhood kids would play different games and stuff.
Like what kind of game?
Kick the can.
Okay.
After dinner and the dishes were done and everything, we could gather out and play and just to get together and talk and, and just got to enjoy all the neighborhood kids.
What kind of chores did you have at home?
Oh, dishes and help my mom in the kitchen and my brothers were supposed to help take turns doing dishes, but when it was their turn, they would hide the pans in the oven. So then when it was my turn, they would get them out of the oven and say, oh, you gotta wash these, and where'd they come from? I used to get so mad at them. So, and when the Mercuries were playing, I was always madly in love with Bob Rosales.
Oh, yes.
Robert Rosales.
He was a shortstop.
Yeah, he was so good looking, and not too long ago I met him at Walmart. He's 91 now, and he's still a nice looking man, and so I went up to him and I said, hi Bob, how are you? And we were talking. I says, I used to be so madly in love with you. I said, when I was a kid and you played with the Mercuries. He said, well, I'm single. I said, yeah, but I'm not.
Yeah, he was a captain
Yeah,
in the shortstop with the Mercuries
Yeah,
back
for
back
years
then.
he played
Yeah.
with the Mercuries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about did you go to dances? You mentioned with the
No.
wedding where you met at the wedding, Sal Flores' wedding. And what about
No, I didn't go anywhere.
no?
No,
Yeah.
it was always a family thing. No, just didn't, like when I got in high school, different
Uh-huh.
dances or stuff they had, I could go with other friends, that we'd get together and go.
And who were your friends when you were growing up and going to high
Tonya
school?
and Linda Chavez.
Tonya
Because
and
they-
Linda
they
Chavez, they
lived
were
right
they were
around the
neighbors.
corner,
They were
yeah.
neighbors, yeah.
And Roberta Dominguez. And,
Roberta was in my class.
Yeah. She passed away
I didn't know
Yeah.
that. No.
about 2 years ago. She
Okay.
passed away. And that was about it. There weren't some of the mercados. As a matter of fact, Lupe Bautista had a birthday party gosh, it's already been, I'd say, 5 years ago or so. And I saw Angie Mercado walk in, and it was at a Knights of Columbus Hall. And so she was over there talking to some ladies, and I told Gil, I'm gonna go over there and talk to her. So I went over and I said, hi, Angie. And then she says, I don't recognize you. And then I said, I'm Mary Van Aken. She started crying. She said, told the ladies that she was with, she taught me English. She says, I didn't know any English at all, and she taught me English. And I said, well, I didn't know Spanish, so I had to teach you English. Because we used to always, visit with them, the kids, we'd all get together, because I think they had 13 kids, the Mercados.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they
did.
had a big family.
Right, and
And-
Mike was one of the ball players.
Yeah.
And then Chaniti was a good handball player.
I ran into him not too long ago at Stater Brothers, and he looked the same. That's how I recognized him, he looked the same to me, and he was telling me that his wife has Alzheimer's real bad, and she's in a home. And and then when Gil was in the hospital for 13 months, a couple years ago, his two sister-in-laws talked me into going to the senior citizens there at Lucky Center for lunch. And so I met a lot of schoolmates there, and this one young man that was there, I went up to him and I said, are you at Mercado? But he was one of the youngest ones, so he didn't remember who I was. And so I said, yeah, I said, I used to always be with all of your sisters. I says, oh, as a matter of fact, Rosalina and Angie were at the reunion, the Wilson reunion.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I saw them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like you had a nice, knit, close neighborhood.
Yeah, we did. All of us always kind of stuck together. And when I'd go over to Tonia's, her mom would always have fresh flour tortillas, and my mom never made them. My dad wouldn't eat them. And so she'd, you want a tortilla with butter? Sure. And right away she'd warm me up and put some butter on it. And I said, oh, this is the joy of coming
Food
here,
for
you
the
know.
gods, eh?
Yeah.
So you look forward to going to
Yeah.
Chavez's house.
Yeah, because my dad didn't care for Mexican food too much, so it's strictly meat and potatoes.
Talking about your dad and mom, and talking about you too, was there, and then you marrying young, was there any, how can I say this, because you were gringa and Gil was Mexican, was there any feedback or kind of those things shouldn't be done?
Well, when we got married and we were on our honeymoon, my mom and dad went to his folks to return some bowls and pans. And his mother told my mother, this marriage will never work because she's a gringa and she's too young. We just celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary in July.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations.
So I said, well, your mother probably turning in her grave.
But there was that attitude, wasn't it, Gil? That attitude that never the twain shall meet or mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went against the grain in Colton.
Yep.
You went against the grain in Colton. Yeah.
There was quite a few prejudice against Chicanos from South Colton too, in Colton, the city
Yeah.
of Colton. Like I remember the Hub City Theater, the New York, and the New Colton.
The New Colton.
New Colton.
Yeah.
We had to sit on the left side. I don't know why. They didn't want us to mix in with the gringos. So the ushers always pushed us to the left side of those theaters. And I always resented that. I wanted to sit in the middle.
Uh-huh.
But no, no. And then, like, the city had we call it a Colton plunge. And it was real nice warm because we used to get the spring water. It was warm.
Right.
Partition.
Right.
It was always nice. But they weren't, the only time they would allow us to go there to swim was a day before they're gonna change water.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't want us Mexicans to contaminate the water.
Well, you're right about the plunge being filled with warm spring water.
Mhm.
That the temperature was 83 degrees. So it was wonderful, type of temperature for swimming. So that was very nice. But they did have that any other thing that you remember, Gil, that would, because we lived at a, you know, it was, you couldn't cross the railroad tracks,
Oh, no.
right? You couldn't cross the railroad tracks. You had to stay on your side of the.
Didn't you live on,
I lived on O Street.
O Street, yeah.
Uh-huh. I lived on
Yeah.
O Street. And, do you remember the other incidents, Gil, that it's growing up in the forties that you were exposed to?
Well, I can't think of it right now, but it was quite, how do I want to say it? It was quite an experience growing up in those days, because there was still a lot of prejudice against Mexicans at the time.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And it
Well,
was,
this way, I mean, it's, you went against the grain, both of you. And then you, and also by being a fighter pilot, you know, it's just completely almost as if you were not supposed to do those
Yeah.
things.
like I went to high school, I was the first Mexican-American Chicano that ever was in the student council, also like the student council. I was the first one, like, at that time. And then I graduated from high school, I was second in the class, so I was very proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
And Clarence Lasby was number one, I was number two. And he was just
Who was
smart.
number one?
Clarence Lasby.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and I was number two, and he was very smart, he didn't have to study. I was number two because I worked my fanny out, I would really study hard and I worked real hard in my education.
Uh-huh.
And so I was real proud of the fact that I came in second. I couldn't beat him, he was just smart kid.
Yeah.
And
So those were some of the incidents that you were exposed to, and you know that there was that difference or that prejudice that
oh, yeah,
existed.
he was very apparent.
It was very apparent.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we couldn't buy houses in North Colton back
No,
then.
That's
And now
right.
you live in North Colton.
Yeah,
Yeah. When did you buy your house in North Colton?
55. We got
55.
married
56,
56.
yeah,
Yeah.
January
So
of 56.
you were one of the pioneers to move in North Colton also.
Yeah.
Well, the only, on the whole street, the only other Mexicans were the Ayalas, Sal and Francis.
There on the corner.
They lived right on the corner, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And now it's mostly Mexicans that live there.
But then in 55, during those
Oh,
years,
yeah.
you
Oh,
were
yeah.
really pioneers.
Yeah.
You were really pioneers. Now, let me ask you, were you a Catholic? Were you a churchgoer?
Yeah,
And you went to San Salvador?
no, to Immaculate,
Why didn't you go to San Salvador?
because Father Valencia kicked us out of there,
You're kidding.
no?
Because
Father Valencia was there in 1937 to
Until when
1966.
he got killed, yeah,
And well, you were a devout Catholic, and why would he kick you out?
because we were gringos, and he didn't want us there.
yeah,
So it was,
He-
you were prejudiced against both sides of town.
Oh, telling me.
South Colton by
Yeah.
Father Valencia and North Colton by the other folks. Yeah, so there's no winning, Mary.
I know.
So what did Father Valencia say exactly? He said, I don't want gringos
Yeah,
here?
no, he started with my older brother, George, he says,
Uh-huh.
vete de aquí, yo no quiero gringos aquí. And my brother started
How
crying.
old was George?
He was probably, what, like 13? And so he went home and told my mom, and my mom went up there and he told my mom, no, yo no quiero su familia aquí porque son gringos, váyanse. So my mom found the Immaculate and she said, well, we're going up there, it's further, but he doesn't want us there. So, oh well.
So Immaculate's in North Colton on La Cadena in Olive.
Well, at that time, it was right across from Valley College. There were some
Okay.
little buildings there,
Okay.
and we were in one of those little buildings.
Mhm.
And who was the priest at Immaculate?
Father King,
Father King.
yeah.
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 He
he was-
married us the first time we got married, and then when we did our 25th, he married us again. And then by then, he had died. And so for our 50th, we had Father Ed Gomez. Mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. And in our 60th, we didn't do anything because the year before our son died, on our anniversary. And I said, no, I don't want anything. And
So
our oldest son became a pilot also.
that's.
Dan, our oldest.
Dan became a pilot?
He now flies for FedEx. He's been with FedEx for 20,
some years,
25 years,
Mhm.
probably.
about 25 years,
Mhm.
still flying with them. They had said before, at age 60, they had to retire. Well, now they upped it to 65, because next June he'll be 60. So he says, oh, I get to fly a little longer.
So were you instrumental in getting him interested in flying?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. In fact, he was very disappointed because I flew fighters all my life, and when he was in the late stages of his flight training, he had trouble flying formations. So when they graduated, they stipulated that he could not fly fighters or TAC or interceptors. He had to go. That's where he ended up flying C-141s, and then from there he got a job and went to fly for FedEx. But he was very disappointed that he couldn't fly fighters because he wanted to follow me.
Ah, okay,
Yeah, but
okay.
he had trouble flying. I think it was in his formation flying. He had some fighters. Not bad enough to flunk him out of flight school, but restrict him from
Yeah.
graduating into fighter interceptors or attack fighters. He had to go to multi-engine. That's when he became.
So the legacy continues in the Garcia family then?
And then
Of
his
flying.
oldest daughter
Uh-huh.
also joined the Guard, and she tried to go to pilot training, but she flunked out. She didn't make it. But she's still in the Air Force.
Reserve in the guard. She's a mate. No,
She'll be a major next year.
yeah.
Next May, she becomes a major.
She's just selected. She's a captain, but she's selected now for major.
Gil, you mentioned that you played for the Mercuries. You played second base for the
Yeah.
Mercuries. What are the things that you do with the? Were there? Did you have pals or a group of people? Like Mary had the Paloma, the Paloma
Gang.
kids, the Paloma gang. What about you? Did you have anybody on Fifth Street that you used to pal around with or hang around with?
No, I was kind of an outcast, I guess. And
What do you mean? You were a nerd.
well, when I grew up, there weren't too many kids my age in that street, so it was always going to have to go to a play. Because I started playing baseball in high school. And in fact, my senior year I was captain of the baseball team.
Ah, okay.
And then from there I went into the service, and I played baseball in the service. And then I started playing with the Mercuries.
Yeah.
And I played with the Mercuries for years until, like, I had to get a job at swing shift, and I couldn't play on Sundays. I forgot Sunday I had to do something with a job that I would have to work on Sundays, so I didn't. So I had to quit playing.
Yeah, but in high school, who did you pal around with in high school? Do you remember?
I had this kid named Jimmy Barthel, and I met him in playing baseball, and we became real good friends. And I pal around with him, and I also played around with Paul Muro and El Morales, call him Machete.
Oh, yes, okay.
So I played with
And Ernie Garcia.
and Ernie Garcia.
Ernie Garcia,
Yeah.
Dr. Ernie Garcia,
Yeah.
used to be the dean of the School of
Yeah.
Education here.
Yeah.
He calls you cousin.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
calls you cousin.
My-
Tell him about the Air Force, when you guys were in the Air Force.
Oh, we were stationed, in fact, we joined the Guard to keep away from the draft. Because at that time, if you joined the Guard or reserves, they would not draft you, but you had to join for 3 years. So we joined 3 years, stay away from the Guard, to keep from getting drafted. And then the Korean War started and they activated a squadron. And then I got into flight school and all that, so joined for 3 years to stay out of the Guard, but 28 years, 36 years later, I was still connected with the military. 8 years as an enlisted man and 28 years as a pilot.
But when they did roll call,
Oh, yeah, we were stationed at George at the time, George Air Force Base. And of course, we were in the same squadron. And you have roll call in the morning, 7 o'clock every morning. And Ernest Garcia being ahead of Gilbert Garcia, because Ernest and Gilbert.
Yeah.
So we were standing there and roll call, and they all say, Garcia, Ernest, and he said, yo. And then instead of saying Garcia again, he said, again. So I answered.
he was again.
So I was again for a long time in the squadron. Because the first sergeant, instead of saying Gilbert Garcia, and he says, Ernest Garcia, and he answered, and then I say, again. So then I answered. So I was again for.
But you don't remember any of the guys from La Calle Cinco?
I remember Jimmy Reese.
Yes.
He was younger than me, so
Right.
and his older brother, Ralph, I think his name was, and of course he died
Uh-huh.
really,
I don't remember
real
his
young
name.
when he died.
Yeah. Do you remember the Caldera pool, swimming pool?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The Caldera pool was at the verge of kind of closing up at the time. In fact, we used to go to the swimming pool at the Coldwell Plunge. He used to tell us, once you go swim in the Caldera pool, that's for you Mexicans.
Oh, that's what they told you at the Colton Plunge?
Yeah,
Okay.
and,
You go to the Caldera pool, that's where you belong, so.
yeah, but
Okay.
at that time it was kind of on the verge of closing up. They didn't maintain it and all that, so that's why we used to go to Municipal Plunge.
Uh-huh.
And like I say, we were restricted, and I was really upset about that, 'cause they only allow us to go the day before they change the water,
Uh-huh.
because I guess they didn't
And
want.
you remember what day that was, Gil?
It was,
Yeah.
I think it was either Thursday or Friday, because they used to change the water for the weekend.
Yeah.
So they would let us go in the day before they knew they were gonna change the water.
Uh-huh.
And they used to really upset me. Like one time, we were swimming, there was a bunch of Mexican kids and a lot of gringos and all, and something was stolen from somewhere. And of course, right away, they accused all the Mexicans. So they took us in the office, and they check all our lockers and all that, and of course, they couldn't find the contraband. But it really upset me, and I was growing up at the time, I was just 17, 18 years old, and I was really upset. When they couldn't find the contraband with us kids, why didn't they charge the gringos? They didn't. And that really upset me at the time, that they would single us out, but when they didn't find the contraband, they never charged the gringos that were there and see if they had the contraband, which
Yeah.
obviously they did, because
Yeah.
we didn't have it, so they had to be them.
So double standard still continues.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Now, let me ask you, you said your dad came to Colton, both dads
Mm.
came to Colton. Did your moms work?
No.
They
My,
didn't?
my mom did house cleaning for the doctors in Colton. Dr. Smith, Dr. Martin, and then for that lawyer, what was his name? The one they got to adopt Sandy.
Cotton? I don't know.
I don't remember what his name, but some lawyer that lived in Colton also. I can't think of his name. But that's what she did for a while, and then she became a cook at the Spanish Kitchen that was right next to the new Colton Theater. It was a little Mexican restaurant,
Okay.
and she became a cook there.
Was it the west side or the east side of the theater?
Right across the street from the theater, from the new
No, it
Colton
was
Theater.
right next door, right exactly next door.
Okay.
I don't
It
know.
was
And she was a cook for how many
Probably
years, Mary?
east.
For how long?
probably like 3 or 4,
Uh-huh.
and then she decided to just stay home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they got a foster home. They wanted to have foster kids. God, we had so many kids,
What's-
babies,
Oh, tell me about that experience.
and we
Your
had.
mom and dad applied and?
Yeah, and they got selected, and so we would get like kids that people didn't want anymore, and we'd get them, and then they'd find a place for them, so they'd move them on, and pretty soon we got more, and then we'd get babies that, and it was so funny, because we got this one baby, and he was missing a finger, the middle finger, and his other little finger was chueco. And so we kind of knew who the mother was. And I went to school with her younger sister. And my mom and dad had gone to the high school for open house. And they said, now don't let anybody come in and take that baby. Don't even open the door. So, okay. So this gal comes and I open the door. And she says, I'm Barbara Lujan, And I said, yeah, I know who you are. And then she says, can I see Michael? And my parents had named him Tommy, because when they got him, he didn't have a name. So my mom said, I like the name Tommy. So she wanted Michael, so she said, he's missing a finger. So we let her in, and she looked at the baby and everything, and she says, can I take him to show him to my grandma? And I said, no, we can't let you take him. She says, well, you guys come with me. So my brother Fred and I, okay, we jumped in the van with her. We went to her grandmother's house, and so the grandma could see the baby. And she took us back, and then when my mom and dad got home, I said, we better confess, So we did, and man, we got in trouble. what did we tell you? And we said, well, we knew who it was, and we knew it was her baby, so no problem, you know. But we won't ever do that again. But then we got some teenage boys that, just havoc all the time, and they didn't want this, and they didn't want to eat that, and my mom says, well, I don't know what to feed you. We're not going to feed you something different from the family, you know. And finally, they told the welfare, take them because we just can't have them anymore. And then my mom used to watch babies from teachers at Wilson, that the moms had the babies and they were nursing them. So they said, that way we can come at lunchtime and nurse them. Yeah, she says, I'll watch them. So she watched those babies, about 3 of them. But she was always, you know, taking care. And then we got this one little girl, and we got her, she was 11 days old, and we got her from St. Anne's Catholic Home for Unwed Mothers in LA. And so we got her, and when she was 1.5 years, the welfare said, we better move her because you're gonna get attached to her. And we said, get attached to her? She's already part of our family. So they got a lawyer and adopted her.
And for how long did your mom take care of foster children?
For probably 10 years.
Long time?
Yeah.
Long time.
And then after we adopted Sandy, we says, no, well, you know, now we have a baby in the house, and then lo and behold, my mother got pregnant. You know, she was 44 years old, and she got pregnant with my sister Kathy.
I'll be darned.
And it was just like, gosh. And somebody said, it seems like every time you adopt a baby, you get pregnant. And proved to be true there.
Tell me about Sandy. She went to the University of Redlands.
Yeah.
And does she live in the area still?
No, she lives in Encinitas. And she never really did anything with her education, ever. She paints houses.
She made a husband there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He taught at a school in, like for boys, wayward boys,
Uh-huh.
like out towards the desert somewhere. And they met at a party at the University of Redlands, and that's how they met.
Yeah.
And he was from Newport Beach. And so they clicked, and they ended up getting married, and they still married, live in Encinitas, and 2 hippies. They're still hippies. I said,
Well, you
they're
know, Lily,
old hippies.
Lily, we bonded with Sarah and Fred because we gave our first scholarship that we had.
Scholarships there, yeah.
We gave it to Sandy.
Oh, did you?
We gave it to Sandy, and that's when your mom and dad were very appreciative, and then they would sponsor barbecues.
Yeah.
So we could raise money for scholarship
Yeah.
for Golden High School kids. Yeah. That
And
was back in the
kids-
60s,
Our
mid-60s.
kids, I would donate all these old toys and stuff I didn't want anymore. They'd go and they'd end up buying it all back. I said, why do you guys do that? I said, we donate it so they could sell it to somebody else. But they always remembered all those fiestas that they had there.
Yeah, we had a, well, again, appreciate your mom and dad sponsoring those barbecues so we could raise funds for scholarships. Yeah. Gil, you know, you graduated from Colton High School in the late 50s. You were kind of very familiar with the Korean conflict and also being done with World War II. How did these 2 wars affect the attitude of Mexicans in Colton? Or did they, because we had a lot of our boys participate in World War II and also the Korean
Yeah.
conflict. And when they came home, was there a change of attitude where?
I don't know there was a change of attitude, it was more appreciation for living here in the United States. And it was, in my opinion, they're very patriotic. I never met a Chicano from South Colton that was anti-military or protesters or something like that. Not, they were all very, in my opinion, very patriotic, and they still are.
Yeah, yeah, I guess what I was getting at too is that we were not supposed to go beyond the railroad tracks, But after the Korean conflict and also the World War II, there was the GI Bill,
Mm.
so you were able to borrow money and buy a house. And then also, some of our, our boys, saw that, wait a minute, I paid my dues, and I should be treated as everybody else.
Yeah.
Was there a movement afoot back in the, in those years in fifties to get involved with, city council or run for mayor? Or who were some of the people that were the people that were actively, working with people to get involved in the community?
There was only a couple, Pete Lukey was one, and, Manuel,
Yeah, Pete Lukey was,
Wasn't
lived,
he mayor, became mayor?
he was, a councilman in 1952.
mm,
He became a councilman in 1952. And then, you had Pascual Oliva
yeah,
that also participated.
participated in, local politics.
Yeah, yeah. So was that a movement because prior to that in the thirties, and prior to that, we didn't have any participation in the city,
Yeah.
city politics.
I was approached quite a few times that they wanted me to run for councilman and all that, but I wasn't sure with my flying and my raising my family that politics was the last thing I wanted to get involved
Uh-huh,
in.
uh-huh,
And so I never did, but quite a few people approached me at times, they
uh-huh.
wanted me to run for city council or mayor, and, but politics was not my,
Yeah,
my agenda at all, and I just stayed away from it.
yeah. Do you remember Ralph Cervantes?
Yes,
Yeah, and he, was one that went to court in 52 or 53 because he wanted to buy that house almost across the street from the Colton Junior High School. And he went to court, and he won his court, and was able to buy the house at, close to the junior high school. That's what I was kind of meaning, that coming back from the war, kind of saying that, well, I paid my dues, therefore I should be able to
That's
buy a
right.
house wherever I
well,
want.
this one,
And then, there was also some, benefits with jobs. You know, some of our,
Mm.
they got trained in the military, and were able to do some of the job that they were not, privy to before.
Yeah.
Did you experience that, or was that, did you know people that, just happened to be at the right place at the right time?
I was kind of a hustler growing up, and like, my parents were poor, so anything I wanted to do, I had to earn myself. Like, I remember working real hard to buy the first baseball glove I ever had. I had to work for it, and he was, I don't know what the words I want to say, but, I was kind of a hustler. You asked me, and I picked fruit. I picked oranges, lemons, grapefruit, grapes.
Tom Velasquez used to take them, bunch of the boys.
Yeah. Tom Velasquez had a truck. He used to go out and, like a contract, to pick oranges. And I remember my,
Do you remember what year that was? How old were you,
Oh,
Gil?
I was still a young teenager.
Young teenager?
Because I remember at that time, Tom Velasquez had a rule. He had his crew, and, of course, my brother and I were just kids, and, so my dad talked him into taking us to go become members of his crew and do some picking with him. And he looked at us, and the kids would probably go out and play and not work. And my father said, no. He said, you take them. He said, they'll work. If they don't work, you just come and talk to me, and I'll take care of it. No, we work. And my brother and I, we were hired as one adult. Between the two of us, in fact, we used to pick oranges. And sometimes we dropped the ladder, and we couldn't get the ladder out too good. And I remember Diego,
Contreras? No.
Rosales.
Rosales.
Diego
Rosales.
Rosales,
Yeah.
okay.
He was in the same crew, and And every time we dropped the letter, he would come and help us.
I'll be darned.
He'd stand the letter up, and once we got the letter out, we could work and maneuver.
Uh-huh.
And we did that for quite a few years.
Well, you know, the area was a citrus center.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of oranges, lots of lemon, lots of grapefruit.
Especially the navel oranges in here. In High Grove and Highland, and also, of course, the grapes were in the kind of La Fontana area.
Uh-huh.
And,
So you were involved in picking oranges?
Oh, yes.
Were you ever a cienero that you picked $100 a day?
I don't know. I don't remember if I've never accomplished that. But,
Yeah. But did you do this during the summers, Gil, or Saturdays?
Saturdays.
Saturdays?
And every time I was off school, like in Christmas vacation, Easter vacation, it wasn't fun days for go to the beach. I mean, you go pick.
You go pick oranges
pick
or
oranges
whatever,
or
right?
whatever to
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, and how much they pay you per box? Do you remember?
I remember 10 cents a box at one
Okay.
time, but it would vary. But depending, if the crop was good, they paid 10 cents. It was a little not very good. They might go up to 12 cents or something like that. But
Uh-huh.
it wasn't. You couldn't bank it very much. You just got enough to. As a kid, enough to buy my clothes, and I remember I was so happy I was picking oranges, so I had money enough to buy my first baseball glove, my first baseball shoes. And then one time I became kind of real spendthrift, I guess, and I went out and bought some nice kangaroo shoes, baseball shoes. They were real soft and really nice shoes. And I wore those. Well, the war came, I went to Korea and I came back and I wanted to start playing again. And I went and hustled, trying to find my shoes in my old house with my mom. Finally, I asked her, what happened to my baseball shoes, kangaroo? He said, mijo, it was so soft and nice that I had my tata take the spikes off, and I wore those myself. My nice kangaroo shoes. Said, oh, they were so soft. And I remember it was quite expensive. I saved a lot of money to buy them.
Uh-huh.
I came back and my mom, but she got changed with them. She wore them out.
Now, did your mom and dad always live there on Fifth Street?
Yeah, when we came to Colton, we lived further north than where we were at, and then they bought the house where we were at, and we moved there. We lived there.
Okay, okay. And Mary, your mom and dad, did they always stay at the house on Congress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When Mom died, living there, and then my dad died. Well, he had signed it over, turned it all over to my youngest son, Mike.
Yes.
And Mike got real sick, and he couldn't do anything with it, you know, and his wife and sister-in-laws and that, they would all go on the weekends trying to clean and that, but he couldn't. He got Addison's disease, and he was on so much medication, and so finally he says, I'm gonna have to sell it, and the city wanted to buy it, and he finally ended up selling it to him, and then they made a parking lot out of it, tore the house down and made a parking lot.
It was a shame because
I don't know what the parking lot, it's in such a weird place, what
And-
it's for, but
yeah.
you know, they made those new baseball fields and whatever there, so I don't know if there's a way to get from the parking lot to there, there's a gate or what, I don't know.
Well, let me ask you, you bring up another point that I just remembered. When you lived on Pine Street, next to the Blakeleys, there was the old housing project. Remember that?
Yeah,
The old housing
across the
project.
street, yeah.
Across the street, the old
wooden
housing
one,
project,
yeah.
the old wooden ones. And I don't know how many they had, but there were a whole bunch of
Yeah.
them. Do you remember those, Mary?
Oh, yeah. I met some, well, I was in the 5th grade there at Garfield, and this one kid that was there, he was Hawaiian, Chinese Hawaiian, he was born in Hawaii, and his parents worked at the Club Pago Pago.
Oh.
Remember that nightclub
Yes,
they had
yes,
there?
yes, yes, yes.
And the father was playing steel guitar or something in the
Ukulele
band,
or
yeah, in the
something?
band, and the mother danced. And he was an only child, and so I got to know all the Hawaiians, and so one day I invited them all to the house, and here I come. up the driveway with all these Hawaiians barefoot. And my mom and dad like, what is she doing now? I said, oh, these are my Hawaiian friends.
And they lived in the projects?
Yeah.
The ones that were
That all
entertainers
were-
at
yeah,
the
they were all
Pago Pago?
entertainers, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where they lived.
I'll
And so
be
we
there.
became really good friends, and
Uh-huh.
my mom and dad, you know, would always have them over, and they would have them over, and as a matter of fact, Gil and I, when we went to Hawaii, he was over there with the Air Force, and then I flew over to meet him, and I said, I'm gonna look up my friend Paul, he used to play, you know, in the band, and so I looked in the phone book, my God, there was like 20 Paul Changs. So then I said, I'll look up Basil. There shouldn't be that many Basils, and I think there were 3. And the first one I hit it, it was him. And he said, well, let me give you my dad's phone number and that. He says, I got a lot of company right now from England, because they were pretty wealthy, and they sent him to school to England. And so I called him, and he said, oh, he was so excited. He says, meet me at such and such a corner at the mall, at a shopping center, and then you're gonna follow me to the house, because you cannot leave a rental car. You come back and it'll be stripped to nothing. When they find a rental car, they strip it. So we're there, and it's pouring rain, and Gil says, how are you gonna know this man? You haven't seen him in 30 years. I'll know him. So this Volkswagen bus drives up. This guy gets out, and I said, there he is, and I went, and sure enough, that was him. And we hugged and everything, and he said, okay, follow me up to the house. So we went up there and met his previous wife had died of cancer, and he had remarried, and so then he said, we want to take you to this place to eat. And we went to this real nice restaurant. And then we went back to the house, and then he says, I'm gonna play you some really good music, Trio Los Panchos.
Ah,
My dad had got him interested in that kind of music.
ah.
And he loved it. He had all these albums, you know. And I said, isn't that something we came to Hawaii to listen to Trio Los Panchos?
But it's amazing that that they lived there at the
Yeah,
old
in the
housing
project,
projects.
in the old housing
And
project.
they were all the entertainers at the Pago Pago
Yeah.
Club. And then you befriended all of them.
Yeah,
And they became semi-Mexicans.
right.
I'll be
Because they were
darned.
living with all the Mexicans. I think they were probably the only non-Mexicans in the projects there.
Did they go to school?
The one,
kids?
well, you went to school with some,
One
were
of
they
them.
from the club too?
Yeah.
That they went to, the one that Gil went to school with, she went, beautiful girl. She was a dancer, and she went to a Harris company to buy something. And she went in barefooted, and they chased her out of there. You know, you can't come in here barefooted. Well, she didn't know, you know, in Hawaii, they all go barefooted.
I'll be,
And finally, I guess somebody told her, no, you gotta wear shoes.
I'll be darned. What a small world, Eartha. You
Yes.
never know.
I
No.
know.
You never know. Yeah. Now, it's almost an hour that we've been chatting. Talking about, let me ask you, did I forget anything on my questions, list of questions? Gil, you have some notes there. You have some notes there. You want to go over your notes and see if I forgot anything?
Well, you asked me things that I did, and like my, you know, the school year between 45 and 40, and 44 and 45, it was, of course, the war was real heavy. And I went to school on Wednesdays, but I never attended classes because my job was I used to go to Garfield and Wilson Junior High and go to every room and collect the money and take the order for stamps. And when they, you know, do stamps, and when they had enough for a bond, so I collect them all, make it. Then I go to the bank, with my bike, or if my bike had a flat or something, I had to walk, going. And I used to buy all the stamps and more bonds, and go back and distribute them at the Wilson or Garfield.
Oh, tell me, how did that work, Gil? You would go and collect,
The money, and make a note who it was, the person, the student, and collect the money, and then I go to the bank and buy the stamps and bring them back to the student. So I did that for a whole year, and like I said, Wednesday, I went to school but never attended class. That was
see.
my job, because I used to go to both Garfield and Wilson and collect all this money, stamps, go to the bank, buy the stamps, and then go back and distribute them to the individuals. And when they had enough for a bond, then I have to go back. Well, next Wednesday when I go, I used to buy the bond for them, bring in the
Ah.
bond, yeah. So that was kind of
And you did that for a full year?
for a full year, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Like I say, I went to school every Wednesday, but never attended class. For the whole year. 'Cause that
And the
was
bonds were how much?
$18.75 for a $25 bond. I remember that, it's $18.75. And they used to, students could buy as many as 10 cents of the stamp and collect them until they got $18.75.
Okay.
Then I go back and buy a bond for them and,
Gil, talking about the bonds, do you remember rationing?
oh yes.
Tell me about rationing.
Well, during the war it was rationing on certain items. Like I remember meat products, you could only buy meat on maybe 3 days a week or something like that, and they were limited in what you could buy. But it
Wasn't it
wasn't that,
flour and sugar too?
yeah, other commodities was, and it wasn't too restrictive, but it was kind of cut back on, on what you could buy and all that. And it was during the war years, yeah.
How about gasoline?
You restricted, you only allowed, can't remember, I think it was 10 gallons a week or something like that. You had to have stamps. You buy the stamps and then you had to use the stamps to, not like money, but to buy 10 gallons of gas. You, besides the money, you had to have the stamps that allowed you to buy them. Because they were restricted, you couldn't just buy a gas for going riding, you just use it to go to work and back, or go to school and back.
Okay, okay. And you mentioned your kangaroo shoes that your mom took.
Yeah.
Now, where did people do their shopping, Gil?
At that time, there were 2 stores in Colton, primarily.
Hellman's?
Hellman's.
Brills?
And Brittles.
Willits?
And Willits.
And Willits.
That's about the only ones. That,
Uh-huh.
and of course, it was real popular at the time to order things from the Sears catalog.
Okay.
Sears catalog was like a Bible. Every time the new one came out, man, it was a Bible.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
no,
Stater
Now,
Brothers.
where would you get the catalog? Would they,
They would send it to you, you apply for it and send it to, you get a one from Sears and also Montgomery Ward also had a
Okay.
catalog. And you could order through the mail.
so a lot of people would buy out of the catalog?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I learned the first COD. You order the stuff, cash on delivery.
Uh-huh.
When they deliver stuff, you have to have the cash to pay for them.
Okay, okay. I'll be darned. So it was a kind of like an Amazon back then?
Yeah. Not quite that fancy.
Yeah, yeah. Anything that I left out from your notes, Gil? Look at your notes again. Anything that I left out?
And we all shopped at Stater Brothers.
I was gonna ask you
I
about.
think that was the only grocery store,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Then finally they got a Safeway.
Safeway. The Safeway didn't remain open too long. That's a few years and it closed.
But I remember shopping at Cervantes,
Yeah. Cervantes and
Esperanza,
Martinez
Martinez Bakery.
Bakery, and but they also had groceries there.
Yeah, the
And
tortilla factory next to it,
that's where you should kind of shop.
La Calle Siete.
Garcia.
Yeah, Doña
Okay.
Lala that had
But-
tamales,
Tamales.
tortillas.
El menudo on
What
Saturday
was
and
this?
Sunday.
Doña Lala Morales.
Oh, yes, across the street from, or close to the church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She used to make some real good menudo.
She did?
Oh, yes. We used to, she only made it on weekends, I think, and you had to go buy it. You take your little pot, you go your little pot so you could fill it out for you.
Yeah, a few years ago, I was at my brother's, and, well, he passed away, but my sister-in-law, she had a party for one of my nephews that graduated from high school. And the table I sat at, they all worked at Stater's, and a couple of them were big, high-up guys in the warehouse. And so they started asking me, well, where do you shop? I said, well, I used to always shop at Stater's. Even before I got married, I shopped there with my mom. But I said, now I do most of my shopping at the commissary. I said, because we get everything cheaper and we don't pay any taxes at all. So I said, we go to the commissary about twice a month and $300-400 of groceries. And I said, then things that I need quickly, I get them at Stater.
Well, you were like your father. Your father used to shop like that.
Yeah,
He'd get everything at the commissary.
yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that I forgot, Gil?
Well,
Mary?
like I said,
anything?
as a kid growing up, just, I got here to know that I used to have to, my parents were poor, so we had to, anything we wanted, we had to work for it. And I picked oranges, lemons, grapefruit, grapes, apricots, figs. Apricots we went to Hemet, figs we went up to Fresno.
Oh, you went to Hemet too?
Yeah. To,
For the 5 or 6 weeks that you?
yeah, that during the harvest of the
Yes,
apricots.
yes.
We used to
yes.
go and the farmer, the rancher, the farmers would provide us tents and outhouses and amenities and showers. And we used to go live there and stay there and pick their crops and move on to the next ranch, and they do the same thing.
And you said you went up north, Central Valley, or?
Yeah, I went to Fresno. They used to have harvest for pigs, and so we used to go as a family up there, and they provided a tent and just enough to. I remember the stoves that they provided was a 55-gallon drum with a coal cut and stuff, and then dirt, and then rocks and for the wood and all
Like
that.
you'd see in La
And
Bamba,
and
the little camps that they had.
And the top was a griddle of a 55-gallon drum,
Uh-huh.
and that was so we did our cooking.
So if California grew it, you picked it.
Yes, I picked 3 lemons, oranges, grapefruit, grapes, and I got a note here, onions, potatoes. Onions and potatoes were in the area of Nuevo.
Yes.
Okay, in that area, and of course figs. I hated to pick potatoes. Because it's not a stoop labor, but it was stoop labor, but it wasn't what I hated. What I hated, sometimes you see a potato that looked good, you pick it up to put it in your sack, and then it was rotten at the bottom. Oh, those stinky rotten potatoes are really stinky. And that's why I used to pick potatoes. But I picked onions and potatoes and grapes.
You said, where did we like to eat? Remember down on Valley Boulevard, way down, was Derby House?
Yes.
My dad loved to go there to eat. So on
And what was his
Sundays,
favorite plate?
steak, even though we ate that at home all the time. First time Gil took me out to a nice restaurant to eat, he says, what are you gonna have? And I said, I want a cheeseburger. A cheeseburger? You need to order a steak. I said, I eat steak at home every day. I don't want a steak.
Yeah, her father was really a steak and potato man.
Oh.
He eats steak and potatoes every day.
He'd raise a calf till it was big enough, have it slaughtered, and have it all steaks and roast. And there used to be a place in town where you got lockers and you rented them, and they put all your meat in there for you, and then when you wanted some, you went up and got it. And so that's what he did, and then he'd raise a pig, and then we'd have pork, and then that's all we ate.
Chickens, you all had chickens.
Till he bought a huge Amana freezer. I mean, that thing was huge. Then we didn't have to go up there anymore. We put it in our own freezer, and it just.
Well, I do remember going with Freddie and your dad to the freezer. I think that was located on Mill Street in that
I don't
area.
remember where.
He also rented one up in Grand Terrace someplace, freezer.
And I said, why are we coming here? And they would tell me the story that your dad would buy the animal, slaughter it, and then just save the meat in the freezer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They used to package it for him. They used to ask him how many you wanted, 2 or 3 steaks or roast or whatever. They used to package it and freeze it for him. But he used to raise calves, like maybe butcher, put in the freezer. He had some pigs too that could grow up, butcher, put in the freezer. And of course, he always had chickens in the yard for eggs and chickens.
So, Mary, you was quite a family. Your
Yeah.
mom had a garden, a camellia garden.
No, my dad.
Your dad had a
He
camellia
had
garden.
over 1,000 camellia plants. He loved plants.
He, camellias were his specialty. And he used to grow them and he used to graft them. Like, for us, he grafted one. They had 4 colors in the same plant: pink, red, variegated, and white. And they were the type, they all bloom at the same time.
Uh-huh.
He did this, and so when it was blooming, it was a beautiful, beautiful plant. He had 4 colors of camellias on the plant. It was such a nice plant. And he had a plant, of course, camellias you have to kind of shade on the north side of the house. So we had them on the north side of the house. When we finally had to buy a air conditioner because the kids had allergies. And the one place they located to put the air conditioner, and it's still there. We put it there, and they had to move the camellia plants. And they moved the other ones. The others survived, in fact, they're still there. But the one that he prepared for was variegated, and the combination, that one didn't make it, that one died. And I was so sad about that, because he was a nice, he did it, and he grafted them, and he picked them so they bloom at the same time. So here's this plant, and the blooming, they had pink, red, white, and a variegated one, all at the same time.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful
Well, I
plant.
remember your mom used to sell it for boutonnieres,
Yeah,
for graduation.
corsages,
And
too.
corsages.
yeah.
And corsages.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for being with us this
You
afternoon.
can keep these pictures because Dominic printed them up last night.
Okay,
That's what he said, that
okay.
Mr. Acosta's the one that got me into photography.
This was,
See, Frank, tremendous influence. Now,
this
let
was
me ask you
Dominic.
one last question
We
of
got a
both
lot
of you.
those.
Well,
Let
Did
me,
you
let
write
me,
it?
yeah,
Write the
we can
name.
keep that one, yeah, we like it. Well, let me ask you one last question of both of you. Both lifelong residents of Colton. What was the best thing about living in Colton?
Well, like when we bought our house, he was going to UCR, and we looked at houses in Riverside, and we couldn't find anything we really liked. And then we decided we needed to get a used house that had a yard in it, because he didn't have time to put a yard in. So we found that one on Valencia, for sale sign, so we stopped. And it was, the owner was one of the Smiths from the Smith Flower Shop. And so that's how and then we said, this house is, we need to buy it. Elementary school's here, junior high's up the street, the high school's down the street. So we had one boy at the time, and so we said, that way the kids can all go to school right here. So that was the big selling point, because the schools were all walking distance.
So schooling was one of the
Yeah.
best things
Yeah.
in Colton. And the high school was just down the street
Down
too.
the street, yeah.
How about for you, Gil? What was the best thing about living in Colton? Or the worst thing?
well, the best thing was I met a lot of real good friendly people. Real good friendly people.
Except the neighbors next door. They didn't like Mexicans.
The worst thing, I can really think of anything could be worse. I enjoy living in Colton. Colton was good to me. Unfortunately, growing up, there was still a lot of prejudice that existed at the time. Like going to high school, I was the first Chicano or Mexican American that was ever in a student council in the high school. I was the first one. I broke that barrier.
Uh-huh.
Just like I broke a barrier going on becoming a pilot.
Uh-huh.
I think I'm the only one pilot that never grew up in South Colton. I think
Uh-huh.
I'm the only one. And
So it was good living in Colton because of family
Family,
Family.
yeah.
and
Friends.
friends
yeah,
and good opportunities.
there was, like I said, there was prejudice at the time, but I think they existed everywhere.
Well, prejudice that's the way it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
So people accepted that. That's the way it is.
And that used to upset me in those days because, especially when I came back from being in the Korean War, I came back and I think that we needed to be treated equals. None of this prejudice stuff, and that upset me
Yeah.
in those days.
Yeah,
But that was at that time that was life.
yeah, yeah. Well, Gil and Mary, thank you so much for being
Oh,
with us this
you're welcome.
afternoon. Thoroughly enjoy our hour and a half
Yeah.
together. And it brought back lots and lots of memories. Lots of memories. And then also, you know, the Hawaiians being part of our cult history
Yeah.
also.
And the projects.
And then when you visit them in Hawaii, they were Bolero, Los Panchos
Los
fans.
Panchos, yeah.
So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Thank you.